Hi everybody, welcome back to Leah's Library. Today we're going to be reading two stories that come from different native tribes from North America. The first one is called The Legend of the Indian Paintbrush, retold and illustrated by Tomie dePaola. That story comes from the Great Plains area. I'll show you on the map in just 1 second. Our second story is called The Hungry Giant of the Tundra, and that takes place in Alaska. So let's look at the map here. We're going to North America in our stories today. North America is this big continent right here. And the Great Plains are in part of what is the United States now, right here, and Alaska is all the way up here at the tip top. So let's look at a little bit more detailed of a map right here. See, you can see the United States of America right here, and the Great Plains stretches all the way from down here in Texas, and it runs all along the Rocky Mountains, all the way up into a little bit of Canada right there. Alaska is all the way up top here. So that's where we're going in our stories today, North America. In the Great Plains, there's tribes, some of the names you might recognize, like the Apache, the Arapaho, the Blackfoot, the Cheyenne, the Comanche. There's a lot more tribes that live in the Great Plains, and if you're interested in learning more about them, I highly encourage you to look it up either online or go to your library and find some books about the many, many tribes that live in the Great Plains of Northern America. So let's go ahead and start. We've got The Legend of the Indian Paintbrush. Retold and illustrated by Tomie dePaola. Many years ago, when the people traveled the plains and lived in a circle of teepees, there was a boy who was smaller than the rest of the children in the tribe. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't keep up with the other boys, who were always riding and running and shooting their bows and wrestling to prove their strength. Sometimes his mother and father worried about him. But the boy, who was called Little Gopher, was not without a gift of his own. From an early age, he made toy warriors from scraps of leather and pieces of wood, and he loved to decorate smooth stones with the red juices from berries he found in the hills. The wise shaman of the tribe understood that Little Gopher had a gift that was special. "Do not struggle, Little Gopher. Your path will not be the same as the others. They will grow up to be warriors. Your place among the people will be remembered for a different reason." In a few years, when Little Gopher was older, he went out to the hills alone to think about becoming a man, for this was the custom of the tribe, and it was there that a dream vision came to him. The sky filled with clouds, and out of them came a young Indian maiden and an old grandfather. She carried a rolled-up animal skin, and he carried a brush made of fine animal hairs and pots of paint. The grandfather spoke. "My son, these are the tools by which you shall become great among your people. You will paint pictures of the deeds of the warriors and the visions of the shaman, and the people shall see them and remember them forever." The maiden unrolled a purely white buckskin and placed it on the ground. find a buckskin as white as this," she told him. "Keep it, and one day you will paint a picture that is as pure as the colors in the evening sky." And as she finished speaking, the clouds cleared and a sunset of great beauty filled the sky. Little Gopher looked at the white buckskin, and on it he saw colors as bright and beautiful as those made by the setting sun. Then the sun slowly sank behind the hills. The sky grew dark, and the dream vision was over. Little Gopher returned to the circle of his people. The next day he began to make soft brushes from the hairs of different animals and the stiff brushes from the hair of a horse's tail. He gathered berries and flowers and rocks of different colors. He crushed them, and he made them into his paints. He collected the skins of animals which the warriors brought home from their hunt. He stretched the skins on wooden frames and pulled them until they were tight. And he began to paint pictures of great hunts. And of great deeds. All pictures of members of his tribe and the things that they've done. Of the great dream visions, so that the people would always remember. But even as he painted, Little Gopher sometimes longed to put aside his brushes and ride out with the warriors. But always he remembered his dream vision, and he did not go with them. Many months ago, he had found his pure white buckskin, but it remained empty because he could not find the colors of the sunset. He used the brightest flowers, the reddest berries, and the deepest purples from the rocks, and still his paintings never satisfied him. They looked dull and dark. He began to go to the top of the hill each evening and look at the colors that filled the sky to try and understand how to make them. He longed to share the beauty of his dream vision with the people. Look at those beautiful colors. But he never gave up trying. And every morning when he awoke, he took out his brushes and his pots and his paints and created the stories of the people with the tools that he had. One night, as he lay awake, he heard a voice calling to him. "Because you have been faithful to the people and true to your gift, you shall find the colors you are seeking. Tomorrow, take the white buckskin and go to the place where you watch the sun in the evening. There on the ground, you will find what you need." The next evening, as the sun began to go down, Little Gopher put aside his brushes and went up to the top of the hill. As the colors of the sunset spread across the sky, and there, on the ground all around him, were brushes filled with paint, each one a color of the sunset. Little Gopher began to paint quickly and surely, using one brush and then another. And as the colors in the sky began to fade, Little Gopher gazed at the white buckskin, and he was happy. He had found the colors of the sunset. He carried his painting down to the circle of his people, leaving the brushes on the hillside. And the next day, when the people awoke, the hill was ablaze with color, for the brushes had taken root on the earth and multiplied into plants of brilliant reds, oranges, and yellows. And every spring from that time on, the hills and meadows burst into bloom. And every spring, the people danced and sang the praises of Little Gopher who had painted for the people. And the people no longer called him Little Gopher, but he who brought the sunset to the earth. That is a picture of an Indian paintbrush. And as you can see here, I have this magnet of an Indian paintbrush from New Mexico. I grew up with these flowers in the hills where I lived. You can see how they would make perfect paintbrushes and the beautiful bright colors. So that is the legend of the Indian paintbrush. Next, we're moving on to Alaska, the hungry giant of the tundra. This is a story of the Yupik Eskimo people. They are the native peoples of Alaska. One of them. The Hungry Giant of the Tundra, retold by Teri Sloat, illustrated by Robert and Teri Sloat. You see all those children playing? These girls down here are drawing in the dirt. And this boy is balancing on a fallen log. These children are jumping on barrels. Just having fun outside with whatever is around them. In a village far to the north, the children always ran home before Akaguagankak, the hungry giant, came across the tundra, looking for his evening meal. But one night they were having so much fun outside, they pretended not to hear their parents calling them in. Instead, they played farther and farther from the village. The smallest boy was the first to smell the breath of the giant. In the air he heard the voice of Akaguagankak coming across the hill. I smell little children warm in the sun. I'll eat them all one by one. The boy ran to the other children. Akagugangak is coming, he shouted. Because he was the smallest, no one paid much attention to him. But soon, one by one, they too smelled the ugly smell, and they heard the giant's voice. Then this tundra darkened with his shadow. I found little children warm in the sun. I'll start my dinner with the smallest one. Oh no! They should have listened to the little boy. Right behind the shadow was Akagugangak. Look at how big he is. The children all ran for the village, but the giant reached out and scooped them up, even the smallest one, and carried them off to his favorite eating place. Ah, what a dinner, said the giant as he searched his pockets for his knife. But the giant was also forgetful. He had left his knife at home. The hungry giant sat for a long time wondering how to keep his dinner from running away while he went to get his knife. Then he had an idea. Since giants are not very modest, he took off his trousers and tied the legs together to make a bag. Then, one by one, he dropped all the children, even the smallest one, into the bag. He tied a knot in his suspenders and hung the trousers in a tall tree and lumbered off to get his knife. Now, in the top of that tall tree was a little chickadee singing, chickadee-dee-dee-dee, chickadee, chickadee-dee-dee-dee, chickadee. And as soon as the giant disappeared over the hill, the children called to the bird, Chickadee, with your strong beak, fly down and help us. Chickadee, with his strong beak, flew down and pulled at the knot, and pulled on the knot tied in the suspenders. He pulled and pulled until the knot came untied. Then the chickadee held on tight to the suspenders and lowered the children safely to the ground. That's a big pair of pants. They all scrambled out as fast as they could, but before they ran off, they stuffed the giant's pants full of rocks and grass and sticks. They held the bag high, and Chickadee with the strong beak tied the trousers back into the tree. Then the children ran off as fast as they could through the trees. Not far away, they came to the bank of a wide river. On the other side of the river stood a crane, dancing on her long legs. The children shouted, "Crane, crane with your long legs that stretch, help us to the other side." Crane with the long legs fanned out her tail and sat down firmly on the bank of the wide river. She stretched her long legs, until they reached the other bank and made a bridge for the children. One by one, the children walked on Crane's legs until even the smallest one was across the river. "Hide in the trees and wait," Crane said. By this time, Akaguagankak had returned to the tall tree with his knife, and he was hungry. But when he reached into his pants for his dinner, all he pulled out was a rock. He reached in again and pulled out grass. He reached in again and pulled out a branch. He grabbed his pants and shook them. Not even the smallest child was left to eat. The hungry giant was angry. He stomped his feet until the tundra shook. Then he took off down the path after the children. When he got to the river, he saw Crane on the other side, fanning her wings. "Crane with the long legs," the giant hollered. "Stretch out your legs so I can cross the river." To the children's surprise, Crane did as the giant ordered. She stretched out her long legs to make a bridge for the giant. Akaguagankak started across the river. Crane's legs shook under his weight. "Hold still, Crane," roared the giant. Crane steadied her legs, and the hungry giant continued to cross the river toward the frightened children. But when he was over the coldest and swiftest and deepest part of the river, Crane pulled her legs back. With a huge splash, Akaguagankak fell into the river. And since giants cannot swim, he was carried down the river to the bottom of the sea. And the children were safe. Crane flew the children back to the village, where their parents were still calling for them. All the children, even the smallest one, ran right home. And I bet after that they didn't wander away from their village where their parents couldn't see them again. The end. Well, thank you for reading those stories with me, taking place in North America with some of the native tribes from that continent. I hope you enjoyed the show. Come back again and we're going to read some different stories from Africa next time. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.